surveillance this morning, brought to you by Oracle. Attention growing businesses, Oracle. They're offering to cut your current cloud bill in half if you move to Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. For new U.S. customers, minimum financial commitment. See if your company qualifies at oracle.com/Bloomberg. Joining us now from Washington, getting ready for the Joe Matthew extravaganza this afternoon, Nathan Dean is absolutely definitive on piecing together we talked to David Lynch yesterday at the Washington Post.
Yep.
These guys, David Lynch, Nathan Dean, they're wired into this. Nathan, I love what you call the unbearable schedule of Nathan Dean. You call it HalloThankMus, which is from Halloween to Thanksgiving to Christmas. Nothing gets done in Washington. Tell us about HalloThankMus after the shutdown.
Yeah, so, this is going to be a little bit different HalloThankMus just because nothing's been getting done in the Congress for the last 40 days or so. So what I think will happen is that the government's going to reopen it. The vote's expected in the House around 7 p.m. tonight. There could be a little bit of issues around vote counts on the Republican side, but ultimately I think this gets to the president's desk. And then we got to figure out what's coming up next. And we really think there are three things, but most of it's not coming from Congress. Obviously the Supreme Court and the tariff discussion is obviously we're going to have a decision most likely in December. We're most likely going to see the Supreme Court rule against the president when it comes to tariffs. Then when it would open what is known as refund chaos, just for what it's worth, you can't get refunds by electronic check. You're going to have to get it by paper check. That's going to take years. And then you're going to have things like the farmer bailout, and also you're going to have a crypto market structure bill from the Senate Banking and Senate Ag committees. They're going to come out of the gate. But I would just say is that a lot of this is going to get wrapped up by the first part of December because Congress and policymakers don't want to be here in Washington. They want to be home and having their holiday parties at home.
Jeez. I mean, the House of Representatives, they've been home for more than 50 days. This is such a bad look. But tell us how a government reopens, Nathan. This isn't the first rodeo for this government.
Yeah, my wife asked me this morning, does this mean we're going to see everybody on the roads tomorrow? And, fortunately for her, the answer is not really. So what happens is President Trump will sign the deal. This will then just say we're going to have to reopen. And then each agency is going to have their own procedure of how they're going to reopen the government. Now, most importantly for the markets, the SNAP benefits, they're not going to come back in one big swoop. It's going to be a small trickle. But from the economic, at least from the market impact.
Nathan, stop there. Why in God's name, if we say, okay, SNAP is back, I don't like to say, it's food stamps, folks. Nathan Dean, why do food stamps have to come back in a trickle?
Well, it's just operationally. I mean, if you think about the U.S. government, I mean, it's not the most efficient thing out there. And so it's not like there's just one button that can say, go press that button and distribute those food aids. I mean, there are individuals and there's paperwork and there's so forth that has to go through this. And so when you're talking about doling money out to the states and then the states take that money and then subsequently put it into their own programs, it's going to take a couple of days. And so, even though that we have seen some headline risk when it comes to like Walmart and Kroger for this, we've taken the approach that if this money ultimately comes out in November, and it will still be spent, and then obviously will then go back to Walmart and Kroger. So you're not going to see much of a hit there. But, I think the one other thing to keep in mind is data. I mean, we've been operating for about 40 days now without government data. We're going to get a lot of data coming out fairly quickly, and there's really no process of how that comes out. I think what's going to happen here is that each agency is going to create their report, and they're going to say, okay, here we go, send it out. So traders and market participants are going to have to be really careful, at least keep their eyes open, because you're going to be hit with data and data, and that data may be different than what your expectations were when we didn't have that data.
So stay tuned to your Bloomberg terminal is the message there, I think. Is there any question as to the quality of the data? Is this going to be rushed? Are the processes going to be different? Should we be questioning the data at all?
No, I just think the tamper expectations on timing. I mean, like I said before, I don't think everybody's going to be driving back to the BLS tomorrow morning. The data will probably come out in, just in little waves. And so I don't think you're going to see anything in terms of the quality of the data. I think it's just going to be, look, it's November. I just don't think it's going to come out all early next week. It's going to take a couple of days, to get the government reopened and operating again.
Bloomberg surveillance across the nation. Good morning, 99.1 FM, Nathan Dean Radio in Washington, 92.9 in Boston, up to Millinocket. Good morning, Bloomberg 1130. All the different ways you listen to us. Thank you so much for listening to Andrew Surwicki over at Morgan Stanley listens.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty good.
Solid
to say the least. YouTube, good morning on our new digital exercise. Subscribe to Bloomberg podcasts as best you can. It's building happening each and every day. So, Nathan, yesterday, Mike Allen had this in Axios through some government think tank. I don't have it in front of me. But basically, the law created by President Trump up till now is the least law going back to Dwight Eisenhower in 1953. Do you assume, as a grizzled, jaded pro, do you assume that who's ever after Trump, particularly if they're a Democrat, that they just do away with all the stuff that President Trump has done because President Trump didn't make it law?
Well, you know, there is some truth to that. I mean, think about the three ways that you're going to get things done in Washington. It's legislation, regulation, or executive orders. The legislation is the most protected from Trump's point of view because it would take an act of Congress to undo it. But from the regulatory and the executive action, there's nothing here that really prevents a Democratic president from coming in and reversing many of this, other than the fact that there's time and it's going to take a lot of effort to do that. So, you know, I think what we like to say in Washington is that if you really want to make policy stick on the regulatory side, you need 8 years or 2 terms of a president. And when you have one term of President Trump and then you have another term, one term of President Biden, and if you have another term of one President Trump, you know, it's going to be this almost swing, you know, I'm doing the 6-7 motion right now of going back and forth between, you know, have Republicans and Democrats here of essentially reversing each other's policies. So there is some truth to that. And so I would just say is that as we get closer into the 2027, 2028 mind frame, we got to keep in mind what those future presidents want to do.
Paul, get one more in here.
So, Nathan, what's the key thing here? I mean, we have just this market open till, I guess, January. Is that it? Do we have to revisit this stuff?
Yeah, so the government will reopen until January 31st for 9 out of the 12 appropriation bills. Those other 3 are USDA, veterans, and Congress. So are we going to see a government shutdown in January? I don't think so right now, with a caveat is, you know, we have to see what comes from the White House in terms of rescissions, because it takes 60 votes to appropriate. It takes 50 votes to actually rescind that money. And that equation just doesn't work. So if we see steps from the White House to rescind the deal that has already just been made, Democrats most likely will say, look, let's shut it down again. But shutdowns in election years are extremely risky. Nobody likes doing it. So I think this actually sticks and they kick the can even further.
A Nathan Dean Marathon tonight. Nathan Dean up till 2 a.m. Covering all for Bloomberg Government, Bloomberg Intelligence on the ballet in Washington. This is really important. I got a call from Wake Forest. And they said, would you lose the Belichick New York Giants talk?
Oh, boy.
He's got